Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, as always, we are so happy to have you along for the experience. And this is, of course, a special episode of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show because we have with us a special guest who has come all the way from St. Louis, Missouri. Is it St. Louis or St. Louis?
St. Louis.
St. Louis.
But you can say St. Louis. It's Meet Me in St. Louis is the song.
St. Louis is the song, right? And it was obviously named for St. Louis, who was one of the Louis kings of France. Louis the 14th is
burnt the Shas. Louis.
St. Louis?
Yeah, in fact, on the famous story with the Panovich, where he went to the Arch of Titus and said, Titus, Titus.
Yeah.
All right, so we do that in St. Louis. My colleague, Yitz Daum, Chofetz Chaim guy, every Tisha B'Av, he goes to the statue of St. Louis, and he says, St. Louis, you burned the Shas. And anyway.
I mean, they burnt it, I know, in front of Notre Dame, and I forgot who said. One of the Rishonim said that you're going to see Notre Dame's going to burn down because of that.
Really?
Yeah, and a couple of years ago when Notre Dame burned down, they said, told you. What goes around comes around. So anyway, so from St. Louis, Missouri. I was in St. Louis for my first time in 1968, summer of 1968. Wow. My family went cross-country. 2 weeks to go from New York to California, 2 weeks to come back. And we stopped off in St. Louis and we saw the big arch.
They just built it.
And the gateway to the west, as it was called. And it was one of the most hot, humid, miserable places I have ever been at in the summer. It was a godsend compared to Houston, Texas.
Right. Or Orlando.
Where we had, Orlando was pretty bad. I haven't been there in the summer, to be fair. But
Go with your wife and kids to Disneyland and you'll understand.
I was in Houston for a national convention when I was in Houston. And you could not walk outside the front door. We just had this heat wave here in Israel, and the air was like a physical barrier. You could not walk through the air. It was so hot and thick. It was like having to, that's what it was like. You stepped outside of the hotel in Houston and you thought you were going to die. And, but it's so much better in St. Louis because you have the Mississippi River right there that helps to add to the humidity, when it's not flooding, So it was a lot of fun. Anyway, but so that was the first time I was there, and I was just by you for a Shabbos not that long ago, and we got to go out to the kosher restaurant. Right, there is one kosher restaurant.
Yeah, that's being generous. Yeah.
No, it was very nice. I mean, it's a grocery store that also has a restaurant part to it.
Yeah, they just sold. Yeah, to some investors from New York. Yeah. So.
I was in Denver, Colorado, for a Shabbos many years ago, and I couldn't breathe. They call it the Mile City because it's all the way up in the air. You can't breathe. I was gasping for breath the whole time I was there. So I don't know how people manage it. And
they get used to it.
Apparently you can get used to anything. But I remember when my parents came to visit when they decided to go down for a couple of days of the Dead Sea. And they got down and they wanted to go into the mud baths or something, whatever it is. First, you have to be checked out by a doctor. So he told my parents, okay, have something to drink and drive back to Yerushalayim because you can't stay here. You're going to die. It's so low down that if you have high blood pressure and stuff like that, it's difficult. My parents had a very low level of health, I'm afraid. But So I couldn't breathe. So there's also one kosher restaurant, half of it's milchig and half of it's fleishig, And someone there said, how come more New York Jews don't move here? And I said, why would they move here? First of all, you're in the middle of nowhere. Denver's mamish in the middle of nowhere. It's on top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere, in the Rocky Mountains, So they said, what do you mean? We've got skiing, we've got fishing, we've got boating, we've got hiking, I said, okay, you obviously don't know anything about a New York Jew. I said, there's two things that we do. We shop and we eat. That's it. So if you don't open up like another half a dozen, restaurants and some like real classy shopping, we're not coming here. We're not hiking. We're not, Jackie Mason used to say, a Jew goes away, right away says, where's the pool? Where's the pool? Okay. And then he goes to sit in the lobby. Just wanted to make sure it's there. There's the pool. Good. Anyway, but Beseder. So you're in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, originally you're a Texan.
Born and raised in Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. How did your family end up in Texas?
It's a long story, but the short version is we came through Galveston. Not me, but my grandparents. Right, when they came from Europe.
Why Galveston?
Because I guess Ellis Island, the line was too long, and Jews don't like waiting in lines. I don't know. Galveston was one of the, And what happened in those days.
Galveston. Yeah.
They had X amount of rubles in their pocket left or whatever, and they'd get on a train and they'd go as far as it would take them. I mean, I remember taking Talmidim to these little Longview, Texas, and these places that no one's ever heard of. And you go to the old Jewish cemeteries, Hagaon, Pe'er Hador, on the Matzevas, and Nebuch, all their, Dari Daris are gone. They're all gone. So they went through Galveston to Hugo, Oklahoma. That's as far as they got. And my great-grandfather said, this is no place to raise children.
You think?
So where did they go? Fort Worth, Texas. Yeah. So my father was raised in Fort Worth. And
but there were already Jews in Dallas.
Yeah, there were Jews in Fort Worth, and there were Jews in Dallas. My mom's side.
Not in Oklahoma.
Not in Oklahoma, no. Yeah. My father's side came from Berdichev and Kharkov, and my mom's side, Vilna and Kovna. So we try and take the best of the Litvish and Hasidic worlds.
Texas is big. Everything's big there.
Yeah. It takes longer to go from one end of Texas to the other than from the tip of Texas up to Canada.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
there's an old joke
but the Yidden aren't much ranchers.
There are a few.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a cousin who's a racehorse guy, but
there was this Jewish guy sitting with these, 3 Texans. One guy said, I got a ranch. I got 50,000 acres. I call it the Ponderosa. So the guy says, really? I got 75,000 acres. I call it the Big W. And the guy says, yeah, I have 100,000 acres, and I call it the Texas Roadhouse Ranch. So the Jew's sitting there goes, what about you? He says, I have 10 acres. So they laugh. He says, what do you call it? Downtown Dallas. You heard this? Anyway.
It's growing
Downtown
up.
Dallas.
Growing up was insane. I mean, we didn't have, I wasn't from then, but we didn't have a minyan of Shomer Shabbos.
Really?
There was no shul.
Wasn't there like an Orthodox?
There used to be an
Conservadox.
There was a Conservadox, right? I'll get there in a second. But there used to be an Orthodox shul, and it shut down, and the money was put aside to start a new shul. And then when there were people, and the money was used to start a day school, which is where I went on the condition it had a minyan. So they had a minyan, and when I started getting more interested in Yiddishkeit, I started walking there. It was 2.5 miles from my house, uphill both ways, literally, because they were like, it's kind of like Yerushalayim where you go up and down.
So they saved up their money to be able to build this day school.
Day school, and
that's why it's called dollars.
Dollars, right? or in those days it was an Ir Dal B'Yisrael.
Dollars.
But
that was Marx Brothers line. He goes, "Did you pay your taxes?" So he says, "I got an uncle in Texas." He says, "No, dollars." He goes, "Yeah, dollars taxes." Anyway, so that's amazing.
Yeah, and
the foresight. People have no idea what America was back then.
Right.
He had to mamish build from the ground up everything. There was nothing. We're so used to having things ready for us that people who would go out and start these things. Who were the personalities that built Dallas?
So there were
for Torah.
Rav Mendel Bernstein, Zichrono Livracha, was the first principal. Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelovich sent him to Dallas.
Wow.
The big families at the initial stage were families like the Gersons, the Rosenbergs, the Schultzes, the Shepses. there was, and my parents quickly came in. But it was really, and even the davening. I was into Saturday Night Wrestling. You remember that? You don't remember growing up? Okay.
I didn't watch it, but I am familiar
so
with
when
it.
I went to shul,
Gorgeous George,
Fritz von Erich. But I don't know. Am I allowed to say I know these things on this podcast?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Say anything on this podcast.
But, so I used to come.
That's why I always said, if anyone wants to take me down, it's not a problem. There's enough stuff out there already on me.
So Shabbos morning, I used to walk. And again, I wasn't from, my parents used to follow me in the car. Because, you know, a 13-year-old kid, 12-year-old kid walking 2.5 miles up the side of a highway.
Wow.
I mean, only when I got later, I was wondering, should I have really done that? Anyway, but there were literally fist fights in shul every Shabbos. This one wanted the Aliyah. This one wanted Maftir. This one said he had Yurtzeit. No, you had Yurtzeit last week. No, your family was killed in Auschwitz. A different day.
There were no Jews, and the few of them that get together have to fight with each other.
Correct.
I love the Jewish people.
But it got me to keep coming back.
For the action.
And there was this
just
elderly
Yid.
Yeah, there's this elderly Yid.
Because you were watching the wrestling.
Reb Shlomo Prengler, who came from Lukiv, and he learned in Kotsk. And he loved us kids. And, you know, he'd say, Michael, Kim Du. And he'd take me into the kitchen. And we'd make the setup for the kiddush, never wash the handle for the herring. You'd stick it in, scoop it out, and then just hang it back up. And to this...
Listen, that's already good.
That's good.
Just stick their hand into the jar.
I remember when I was in yeshiva, so we used to write letters. The kids today don't know what letters are.
Yeah.
But, and I wrote them. I was at a chasana, and I had herring, but it wasn't Prengler's herring. It's because it didn't have the botulism from the ladle. But you know, that's what got us coming, and they'd make us daven, and you know, as the.
And this was a day school. I mean,
this was a day school. The principal was considered the Rav, and he'd give the drasha at Kiddush.
So where did these people come from? There were no people.
You had literally a handful of Shomer Shabbos. They came from New York, or you know, most of them came from New York. You had the Rabbeim of the day school. They all, in those days, everyone pretty much went into chinuch for 2 years, just to do their piece, and then they'd go into business. I mean, my 6th grade Rebbe became a multimillionaire, went in the tow truck business. But and then most of them went off into business or became menalim other places. But it was you're never supposed to say the good old days, because I'll say, but those were, you had to fight to be a Yid.
Right.
You know, today it's on a.
When I was running NCSY in Long Island, I did at one point an adult Shabbaton. And we were talking about the problems with the kids in the day schools and the yeshivas. And one of the parents said, I wish I could send my kid to public school and have you pick him up in NCSY. Right. And I said, the problem is we don't always get them. So
and public schools are vastly different today. I'm in them every day. It's, I remember, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I remember when I was learning in Ner Yisrael and Kollel, and I was teaching, starting my chinuch career. You'd appreciate this. The Menahelis calls me up and says, Rabbi Rovinsky, I hear you want to go into chinuch. I said, yeah, I'd like to go back to Dallas, where I came from. And she says to me, okay, it's Hanukkah. I have an 8th grade class. They've already gone through 3 teachers. It's only Hanukkah. How would you like to try your hand in chinuch? That was my introduction. But I asked him, I said, it was Reb Yaakov Weinberg Zitzal. I said, is it better to send your kids to public school or to a non-Orthodox day school? And in those days, this is in the mid-'80s, he says, public school, no shaila. And I was at a chassan of one of my talmidos, probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And so the Newburgers were there, and Reb Beryl, and you know, the whole chevra was in St. Louis. I shouldn't say chevra about these rabbanim, but
well, the chashuvim.
The chashuvim, thank you. And I went up and I said, listen, I'm in the public schools every day with NCSY, JSU, and what would the Rosh Yeshiva say today? Because it was a battle people were sending to the non-Orthodox day school in St. Louis. And they said, we don't know. The schools have gotten so bad with their indoctrination. And, you know, it used to be they taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, and you just had to deal with some things. Today, it's in your face, all the values of society. And if you don't buy into it, then, you suffer the consequences in the
Rabbi
classroom.
Wein said
and
he
other
was in a
places.
car with two Rosh Yeshiva. He wouldn't say the names. And at some point, Rabbi Wein mentioned that he went to public school. So one of the Rosh Yeshiva said, I also went to public school. Another one says, me too. So the one Yeshiva says to the other one, no, you didn't. He says, sure, I did. He says, sing Silent Night. And the two Rosh Yeshiva are singing, Silent Night. And everyone's like, I don't believe this. But when you went to public school, yeah.
And you learn the Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, it was a different world. So today, well, it's so much harder to do kiruv, but you don't do kiruv, to introduce kids to Torah mitzvahs.
So you started in this little day school.
I started in the day school,
Dallas.
right?
How many years before you went did it start?
4 years, 3 years.
So Mamish was just
it was a baby,
fresh.
Right, and
you were a pioneer.
I was a pioneer. My parents,
stagecoach, and
right? They were married a few years. My father his business hadn't taken off. He was an engineer, and they couldn't afford tuition. Because I was writing my father's hesped a year and a half ago, and I turned to my mother and I said, Mom, when we finally had money, we didn't have money, but we bought this house that you built right across from this brand new public school. I said, but you never sent me there. And I said, why not? She says, it had to do with Dr. Sussman. I said, Dr. Sussman? Says, yeah, he met with my parents and he told them, you can't send your kid to a non-Jewish school. Now, he wasn't from. He was what we would call conservative back in the day.
Right. It was a different generation.
You
People
cannot send your kids. So my father went back and discussed it with my mother, and they said, okay.
Some of the biggest builders of Torah in America weren't from.
But because
they were very Jewish.
They were so Jewish, they saw the emes, and they knew, I may not be able to do it.
There's no such a thing. Today, either you're with the program or you're not with the program. But there's no such a thing as like feeling that sense of Yiddishkeit that you used to see among people. It's a whole different thing.
Because they don't even know. The adults that I started learning with, the parents of kids and other adult learning groups in St. Louis, and they're starving. They don't even know. The famous story that Pesach Kron tells with the soldiers in 67. Ani bochesh, amash ani lo boche. Right? I cry because I don't understand why I'm supposed to cry. They don't even know what they're missing.
Right.
So, long story short, my parents couldn't afford tuition, but they're very proud and they're not taking something for nothing. So the board said, okay, Irv, you're an engineer. You're going to help us with the air conditioning, lighting and stuff when there's a problem. That's going to be your job. And my mother went every day with a small group of women who all made it big financially one day. And they cooked the lunches. They served the lunches. They cleaned up from the lunches. But they developed ksharim with the Rabbeim and the Rebbitzins. And then they started getting inviting for Shabbos. So when I eventually got into NCSY and wanted to become frum, they knew what it was about.
Now, where did NCSY come from?
NCSY,
they had been a southern region.
Southern region, correct.
But that was mostly Georgia.
No, it was Dallas, Houston,
No, but there was nothing in Dallas. How could they have been in Dallas?
In the
day school just opened.
Right, so there was a...
So there was no NCSY.
No, NCSY didn't start till the 70s in Dallas.
Right.
And there was a synagogue, Tiferet Israel. That's where my parents eventually moved. That's where I had my bar mitzvah because the conservative rabbi had some... Can I say extracurricular activities?
You could say anything you want.
And when the board didn't fire the rabbi, they said,
really?
This isn't the right place for us. So they moved to the more traditional place. In fact, Stuart Weiss, Shmuel Weiss from Renana.
Right.
So he was my NCSY advisor way back in the day.
I remember it from there.
So
when did NCSY come to Dallas?
I don't know. I joined in 76. And that's how I met Rav Yitz Rosenberg, who changed my life.
Wow. So now you're in Dallas, you're in NCSY, you're flying around the country.
Right.
You were on national board, right?
I was on the national board as social actions.
Do they still have a national board?
They do. It's the presidents from each region. They don't even have national convention. I hope no one from the OU is listening. But that was the greatest convention ever.
It was a different thing. It was just so different.
And we had leadership. It was insane. We do have something called Yarchei Kala, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was Russian Jewry. Remember those days?
Sure.
Making making the posters and writing
1,
letters.
2, 3, 4. Open up the iron door. 5, 6, 7, 8. Let my people emigrate.
Yeah, so that
We used to go down to Glen Cove to the Russian consulate in Long Island, and we used to protest.
In Dallas, all I could do was organize letter writing campaigns because I wasn't, able to go to the Russian consulate because
we did because
they would have shot the Russians in Texas had they tried to come in.
Because back then we didn't have to, if we cared about Russian Jewry, but mostly we got to miss class. So,
right.
That was even greater. We were talking about freedom. So we can get out of class.
My wife, we've been married, Kenai and I are 39 years. And she said, okay, we're going through your filing cabinets. All right, we're not downsizing the house, but we're getting rid of everything you haven't touched in the last 10, 15 years. And I started going.
Why is it that when wives decide to organize, they have to throw out all their husband's stuff?
So I did.
This has always been my question.
I did ask my wife that. She probably won't even be listening to the podcast, so I could probably answer. But she said because I regularly throw away my stuff, so I have nothing left to throw away. Yeah. It's your stuff that's taking up everything. No, but she's good. But I found those old mimeographs
that we have been contacted by collectors. They go back so long. The Smithsonian want to look into them.
So no, NCSY really, really changed my life.
That is unbelievable.
First of all, it gave a geschmack to Yiddishkeit. First of all, it taught us what Yiddishkeit was.
Dallas had a high school by this point?
No.
So you went public school?
I went to day school, and then for 9th grade, enough of the more influential people were parents, so we made a 9th grade for my class.
Right.
And after that was it. So I wanted to go to yeshiva.
Right.
My parents, in fact, I even went to Chofetz Chaim to check it out. Jeff Greenberg was there. I remembered I didn't like the food, so they said, we'll make you peanut butter and jelly every day. I guess that's how desperate. I mean, it was New York. They should be desperate for Talmidim. I guess it would be good fundraising to have someone from Dallas, Texas.
I think today that peanut butter and jelly would be an appealing way to recruit students.
It's a different door. So my parents said no. They wouldn't let, but they made a deal that if I would finish off in public school, then I could go to Eretz Yisrael to learn for a year. So I went to a special school. It was called a magnet school, and I studied heating, air conditioning, electrical, and plumbing because I was going to eventually take over my father's business as a mechanical engineer. I finished high school, and so I went to Eretz Yisrael to Or Sameach. Rabbi Rosenberg sent me there, and the deal was
they weren't really getting post-high school.
No, it was mostly all these brilliant people from all these fancy schools that, with all these letters behind their names. So it was for 1 year. That was the deal. And then I had to come back and go to college. My parents came for Pesach that year. It was the only year I ever found the Afikomen. My sister would always find it. I mean, it was like, okay, it's like, do I even try?
That's because here in Israel, we have those archaeological digs.
Right.
Search for them.
So long story short, for the Seder, we were in the Chofetz Chaim Hotel. I forget what it was called.
Yeah, in Sanhedrin Mechevet.
And I said, okay.
We had Rabbi Orlofsky on the show.
Oh, yeah?
I never asked about that.
Oh, wow. And I had Jeremy Stamen and a whole beautiful chevra, guys with excellent voices and clean cut. And I found the Afikomen that year at the Seder. So my father says, Mike, what do you want?
Wow.
And I said, Dad, I promised I wouldn't ask for what I really want. So here, just take the Afikomen. So my mother gets these tears in her eyes and says, Michael, we know what you want, and we're very impressed with the yeshiva and your teachers and your friends. So if you want us to come back for another year, we'll let you come back. Story. So that's how I ended up for Shana Bet, although they didn't call it Shana Bet. No. It was just, you went to yeshiva. As long as you could.
Right.
I think we may have been the only ones paying tuition back then.
Wow.
That was a great story with Rav Nata Schiller. So my parents gave me Israel bonds. I don't think the people know today what Israel bonds was, but it was huge back in the day. So they gave me bonds to turn in to pay the tuition. So I figured I'm not going to give a bond. So what do? I go into Meir Sharim and I cash the bond for Shkolim. And so I'm carrying this duffel bag with it was probably $1,500 to $200,000 to $1,500 to $2,000 in shkolim, which in those days was a lot of shkolim.
Right.
And I said, "Ooh, I passed a Svarim store."
Oh no!
So then I walked in and I took it into Rav Nutta's office. I thought he'd be so happy that I'm paying tuition, and he says, "What's this?" And I says, "It's my tuition for the year." And he said, "Why did you cash it into shkolim?" Because in those days, it wasn't linked. So every minute, it was becoming less and less valuable. So I think that was probably my only interaction with Rav Nutta in my entire 2 years in
So
in
that was like
Osameach.
during the Lebanon War, during the hyperinflation.
It was, in 80 to 82.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Good times. Sure.
You know, my experience has been when you walk into anybody's office with a large bag of cash, they can't complain too much. You know?
Right.
All right, so you did Sameach.
Yeah, so we did Sameach. Then I came back. I was to Rabbi Rosenberg's son's bar mitzvah, and I was on my way to Ner Yisrael. And
Went to college. That's it.
Well, I was going to go to college at Hopkins or Towson, whatever it was called, Johns Hopkins. And
Those are two different places.
but they're right near each other.
Okay.
So anyway, but I had to get into yeshiva, and it was after Pesach, because I wanted to see my grandmother before she was Nifteres. So I flew back right after Purim. And so I was going to go to Ner Yisrael, and he introduced me to Rav Leib Tropper from Muncie.
Right.
He had just started a yeshiva called Kol Yaakov, and he said, "Listen, come to me." I said, "I'm going to Ner Yisrael." He said, Ner Yisrael, it's college, it's after Pesach. Come with me. If you come, I'll learn with you morning Seder 3 mornings a week, and the other Rosh Yeshiva will learn with you 2 mornings a week. I said, all right, 2 years in Or Sameach and a chance to learn with tremendous Talmidei Chachamim. I'll give it a shot. So I went to Muncie for 2 years, and it was a great experience. I fell in love with Rav Avram Gershon Tress, who was a Rosh Yeshiva. Rav Leib was awesome. We learned Shuvas Rebbe Kiva Eger. It's the only time I've ever actually sat down and learned with someone of his caliber, with Rav Leib. And it was just an amazing experience. And then Rav Tress got sick, and he was nifter. And so I picked up and moved to Ner Yisrael. And then I went and got so while I was in New York, I had to go to college. So the Rebbeinu Shalom, he doesn't need my Haskell of the Eibishter.
Rockland community?
Even better.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman by the name of
Bob's College.
and
Drive-in burger joint.
So I the Stipler, when I wasn't going to say, but the Stipler offered me to go to college. He didn't offer me. I went to him. I said, I want to come back for a 3rd year. And he said, "You're going to America to go to college. It's usser. It's a makom pritza. Snus." He's like yelling and screaming. I didn't even say I was going back to America.
Right.
I just said, I'm going to see my parents. I want to come back for a 3rd. But
he was like that.
Oh yeah.
He knew a lot.
Listen to what he said to me. He said, "You can't go to college." He says, "Become an apprentice to an engineer, and you will make $60,000 a month."
The Stipler said.
The Stipler said this to me.
Does he know that?
I'm like, I remember I had only been from maybe 7 or 8 years. So this whole heebie-jeebie stuff was, this Ruach HaKodesh, it was still heebie-jeebie. So I said, I don't want to go into business. I want to go into Chinuch and Kiruv, which I have to thank Or Sameach for. Because they used to have a rule that no matter how little you knew, you had to learn with someone who knew less than you. So for 30 minutes a day, I was teaching new guys Aleph Beis, because I didn't know much of anything else. And I fell in love with teaching. So the Stipler said, fine, go into chinuch, you'll be matzliach, but don't go to college. So I came back to the yeshiva. I'm freaking out. Zvi Saunders takes me to Rabbi Aaron Feldman, and Rabbi Aaron says, do a correspondence course for college. That's the way online courses was when it first came out. It's like a joke.
Right.
So my parents won't let me do that. He says, then don't ask me about the Stipler. And he got up and he walked out of his office. And I'm like shaking, because here the Gadol Ador told me, don't do it. My parents are starting to become frum. If I don't keep my word, then I'm a shakran. Is this what Torah is all about? So it was a balance. You should know that by now. But this was then. So
you dumb Baal Tshuva. Anyway.
I'm still trying to become a Baal Tshuva. So anyway, long story short, there was a gentleman, Dov Millions, who started a program at Adelphi University for Beis Yaakov girls and yeshiva guys, Beis Medrash guys. So every Sunday, we drove from Muncie
to Long Island.
Not to Long Island. They had an office in Manhattan, which was great. I was able to convince my dad I needed a car if he wanted me to go to college. So, which also helped with shidduchim because everyone would show up in these dilapidated, and I had a nice new fancy Monte Carlo velour seats. It was awesome. My wife still says that's why she married me. But anyway, so that's how I got my BA. And a lot of shidduchim were made in that program.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's how I got my undergrad.
All right, so now you got your grad. You're in Israel.
Right, and
got married in Adelphi.
I'm learning. I got married my first right after Elozman that year, my first year in Ner Yisrael, and I was in Rosh Ragi Shir, who was the Shir Aleph. That was the deal Rabbi Orlofsky made with me. I had to go to Rosh Ragi Shir if I want to come to the yeshiva, and then my second year I joined Rabbi Sachar's Chabura. For a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years. And then I was started learning for smicha, and then started teaching my last 2 years in Kollel. They adjusted the teaching schedule.
How'd that 8th grade job go?
Phenomenal.
Really?
It was.
It
was unbelievable.
You're this guy from the ninth man.
The ninth man on the team. I went in. I said, let me meet the kids first. So I went in, and I was sitting and schmoozing, doing what my NCSY advisors did with me so many years ago. And I said, all right, I'll teach, but I have one condition. And Tzipi Shore says, what? I said, I get to throw out the curriculum. Let me do whatever I want with them. I'll make sure they learn, but let me do what I want. She said, just get me through to the end of the year. and that's what we did. And it was amazing. So, then she rehired me for the next year. I was teaching, I think 4th grade or 5th grade. I don't remember. And it became a passion. Uh-huh. And I bedafka like teaching non-frum kids.
Now, where did Mila come into this?
So Mila was interesting because I faint at the sight of blood.
Yes.
And I cannot stand crying babies.
Yes.
Like I'm the guy that gets surrounded with all the crying babies on the airplanes because I'm always on a plane.
100%.
So,
that's why you like to cut them up. So
my babies
Come
don't.
here, kid.
My babies don't cry. Just ask the mamas. Anyway, with this new powder I just got from Meishla, it's even more amazing. But long story short, I was in Baltimore. I had a son, and we had a daughter and then a boy. And I was thinking, I'm going back to Dallas eventually. I want to be involved in Kiruv. And was there a Mohel in Dallas? There was a Mohel in Dallas, yeah. And the issue is all the non-frum people, generally, after their bar bas mitzvah, they run away from Yiddishkeit.
Right.
And I don't blame them. You got to go to Hebrew school 3 times a week. All your friends are out playing. You don't learn anything. The teachers weren't practicing what they were preaching. And it was a miserable experience. So, but I have to be bar mitzvahed or bat mitzvahed, otherwise I'm not Jewish.
Right.
And then when they realized that you don't have to be bar bat mitzvah, then they came up with this whole confirmation thing, so which they stole from the Catholic Church, but that's another story. So I said, these people haven't had any Jewish connection since their bar bas mitzvah. And for anyone in your audience who's ever been birthed a child, mother or father, and they're holding that child for the very first time in the hospital, your whole world changes. And you begin to think, I want to give over my whole mahus, my whole essence to this child. And whether we recognize it or not, part of that is our religious identity, our faith. And then they realize they don't know anything about it.
Right.
And they don't have a connection to their congregational rabbis because they haven't had one. Maybe they had one for their wedding. And they end up, and they're on a pedestal, so they have no connection to anybody. So I said, listen, I don't have a shul. So that means I don't have a dog in the race. There's no ulterior motive here. I can be a resource for these young couples who are looking for something Jewish in their lives to pass on to their children. And I said, Mila is the perfect entree.
So you went into Mila as a kiruv tool?
As a kiruv tool, correct.
Yikes.
Yeah. Well, there ain't too many frum people. Now there are, but there weren't back when I was planning back in 1990. I mean, they just had their first shul for a few years at that time.
Pesach Krohn told me that the reason he never grew a beard is because there are people who will not use a mohel if he has a beard.
Correct.
They're afraid. And you have to, he puts on a whole white coat and he looks like a doctor and he.
So my Rebbe told me he'd fire me if I ever put on a white coat.
Really?
He says, you're not a doctor. Now, I'm not chaylik on Pesach's like a brother to me. We're extremely close. And there are a lot of moelim who do wear white coats. It depends on, on the audience and who you're catering to. I've never felt the need to do so. I mean, it's bad enough when I travel during the week and I'm only doing Goyisha babies, which is, well, I guess we'll get there. So sometimes I think
it's better than putting on a butcher's apron, because I think that would really be a little off-putting. These people, they go to a town, he's the sheichet and the mohel, and I'm like, I don't know.
But that's the way.
Don't mix up the knives.
It used to be. That's the way it used to be.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a Chamudei Daniel that brings down a mohel. A sheichet shouldn't be a mohel, and vice versa. Why? Maisa Shahaya, sheichet was doing a bris, and he said the wrong bracha. Mm-hmm. He said ala shchita instead of ala mila, and Nebuch, the baby, bled out. Yeah. Listen, but you see, Lamaisa, it's not that way. Sheichtim are moelim, and some moelim are sheichtim. Right. I can't. The older I get, the more sensitive I become. I can't even kill a bug. I'm the guy who scoops it up and takes it outside. I don't know. I can never be a sheichet.
I have had the schus of being a sandik for some of my grandchildren, and I can't even look.
I keep my eyes closed also.
I'm terrified. You keep your eyes. I do that when I drive in Israel because it's so scary.
Right, because it's so scary, right? That's why I always tell the mothers, you don't have to watch. I keep my eyes closed also. But so anyway, it's worked out beautifully because we invite families for Shabbos. Some come, some don't. But I mean, it's been gone so far as people invite me to do their funerals, of the grandparents because they like the way I did the bris.
Wow.
Rabbi, do you do funerals? I've done some chasanas. It's become a great tool. And
you don't bring your knife to all of them.
No, not to all of them. But that's another story. From having to do brisim. But
so you come back, eventually make your way back to Dallas?
After Baltimore, I went back to Dallas for 3 years. I was the Sagan Menahel for Limudei Kodesh and a Rebbe there.
And you were doing Mila?
And I was doing Mila. Right.
You're using this to reach out to people?
Right. When I moved to Dallas, 20% of the Jewish community used a mohel. And when I left 3 years later, it was 80%.
Wow.
It grew so much. But remember, I grew up there. So I had a connection to most of the Reform and conservative rabbis. My parents were Amudei Ha'ir. They were pillars of the community in the secular Jewish community as well as the Orthodox community.
And
they eventually became from, and I speak Texan.
Right.
So I can talk like that if you want me to, but I don't know.
We were driving down to Orlando. So once I passed the Mason-Dixon line, I told my son-in-law, Yisrael Meir, who's originally from Atlanta, Orbach. I said, okay, you drive now because you speak their language. So just they pull us over, you're like, hey, how's it going? Nice to see you all today. They hear me talk, a New York Jew, just shoot him.
Right. Well, maybe
looks like a good day for a hanging.
It made it easier for me to get my gun license when the cops found out I was from Texas. Just give him the license. He knows what he's doing. So I went back to Dallas.
That's an amazing stat. You increased Mila by 400%.
But it was so simple.
It means that even by the conservatives, they weren't doing Mila?
Because they were using doctors.
Wow.
For whatever reason, they weren't comfortable using the local mohel. It's not relevant. But, you sit down and say, what do you need from me for you to be willing to use me as a mohel?
Right.
And we'd work out that, you want to do the whole ceremony? Bavakasha, I don't care.
Want me just to sneak into the hospital and cut the kid? I could do that too. Whatever you want.
Yeah, I've had those
just before nightfall. And
I have an amazing story. If we have later on, I'll tell you this amazing. If the audience, it's an amazing story about that.
My matzahs, not a problem.
But and they, we developed this amazing relationship. So they would tell a mohel is so much better than a doctor in both the action of the Mila because the tools are different.
Someone told me that
and it's faster. Yeah. It's my Rebbe's Rebbe, yeah.
Right? Now it's his brother.
His son, Moshe. I was just with him.
So Yossela, who I still remember when I was learning here in 75, that when they would have a complicated case in Hadassah, they would call him in.
Right.
As opposed to the urologists and all the other people because he just had more experience and knew it better.
Right. And I spent time with Yossela after I got my Kabbalah from his main Talmud, Moshe Rappaport in Baltimore. And then I did some extra training at Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital for reconstructive surgery and hypospadias and all these other things. So my phone.
A knowledgeable mohel is more capable than a doctor to do a Mila?
Than an average doctor, yes. Yes, 100%. It's 15 seconds, almost painless, and the end result is so much nicer. I can't tell you
Where's a doctor?
How many redos. The doctor is 20 to 30 minutes. The baby's strapped to a
20 to
board.
30 minutes?
If they're good, 15 minutes. I can show you videos after the podcast.
Wow.
And although you don't like blood. But yeah. And so my wife is always worried because my phone, I have thousands upon thousands of pictures that other Moilim have sent and doctors have sent. What would you do in this case? So it's a good way for me to go to jail. But
this is unbelievable. So, okay. So now from Dallas, you go to...
So after 3 years in Dallas, the situation was, it was time to move on. One of the main reasons I went back to Dallas was to learn under my mentor in Chinuch, David Liebtag, who was my 7th grade Rebbe. He eventually became the Menayel of the day school. They were there forever. And then he ended up moving to St. Louis. So when I signed my contract to go to Dallas, he says, okay, I'm glad you're coming, but I'm moving to St. Louis. I said, what? I said, I'm the whole, yes, my parents are there. It was great, but I wanted to learn from you. You're my mentor in Chinuch. You better call me when you have an opening. So 3 years later, he called me and said, we have an opening to become the executive director. I said, I want to do chinuch. I'm not interested in raising money. I've never raised a penny in my life. He says, I'll let you teach. Don't worry. So I went to St. Louis. He convinced the board that I knew how to fundraise. And I became the executive director, but I still taught a half a day for the first year. And then the school was growing.
Did you ever figure out how to make money?
No.
Really?
No, at Baruch Hashem, we raised a Weltegeld. When I left the school, when I came, we had, I think, a $2.5 million endowment. And then it got bled down. When I left, it was up to $3.5 million. And now with NCSY, our budget is about $500,000 a year. And we're now in the middle of finishing off a $1.3 million campaign because I'm creating a whole
So you can raise money?
No. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I'm not being from. I hate people that are from. No, I don't hate people that are from. You know what I mean? People who, I'll tell you a ma'aseh. I can give you 1,000 ma'asim. This just happened a few weeks ago. I got a call to we're building this campus in St. Louis. It's a house. It's going to be a homework clinic for kids, Kiruv Center, Teen Minyan, our offices. We haven't had offices since I've been doing this for NCSY for 22 years. So the OU, rightfully so, said, great, times are tough. We don't want you to start building until you have all the money in hand or guaranteed pledges. And I'm like, okay, great, that's going to take forever. So we had $950,000 or 48 committed or in the bank. We were going to do it now in 2 phases because the 1.3 was going to take too long. So I needed $1 million to do phase 1. And I get a call for a bris in Austin, Texas. I'm going to keep it kind of vague because I don't want, in case they hear about it, I don't want them to be embarrassed because I do everything, anonymously. We know that he gives the most money in the world, Mr. Anonymous.
Really?
Yeah, you didn't know that, did you?
I know that he submits the most questions.
Right.
The Rabbi Orlofsky show.
I'm wondering if they're related.
Mr. Anonymous. Yeah.
Listen, if all the money he gives, he can do the questions.
The old Jewish joke is, I'm Mr. Harry Rosenberg of Harry Rosenberg Ladies Wear on Orchard Street. We have a special this week on, sundresses to hereby pledge $1 million anonymously. Anyway.
So he calls me Thursday night and says, I need you next Thursday. Not from, for a bris in Austin, Texas. I said, I'm busy. I'm going to be in Midland, Texas. Because I have offices around the country doing non-Jewish babies. I train.
Now, 1 second. Now,
right.
now this is all of this is an introduction because this is the part that I wanted to get to.
Okay.
1 second. You're the executive director of a day school in St. Louis.
But they got to hear the rest of the story. Yeah. Okay.
Right. You're executive director of a day school in St. Louis, and you're doing Mila. Now, when you moved to St. Louis, you also started reaching out to non-from people with Mila?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I met with all the conservative reform rabbis.
And they were all on board.
All on board.
They were all happy to help.
Dallas didn't want me to leave. The Federation said, would you stay and become the communal rabbi to deal with everybody that doesn't have affiliation, and you'll do all the brisim, and we'll pay you. And I said, no, but I promise anytime someone from Dallas calls me, I will come back, as if it's humanly possible for me to make it back. That was in 1993.
You drive or you fly?
I fly. I have averaged at least one trip to Dallas a week since 1993. Wow. I mean, it's pretty bad when TSA says, it's the rabbi, let him go. Or, Mazel Tov, Rabbi, where you're going. I got some other things, but I can't say it online because then TSA will come after me. I know a lot of their secrets.
So you just show up and they say, hey, Rabbi, is that your Mohel bag?
Right.
No, it's meth. I'm transporting it.
Well, I just picked up, it's over there. I call it Jewish cocaine.
Yeah.
It's a special bris powder, and it's white. So, and it's very expensive. I don't know how much cocaine costs, but because people ask, what's in the powder, Rabbi? I says, it's Jewish cocaine from Jerusalem. But anyway, so what ended up happening was, I fly back.
St. Louis.
I'm in St. Louis. I fly back every week for Brissim.
Right. And you're starting doing Brissim in St. Louis also for the secular people.
Right. The Mohel there was much older. I met him at a chasana. So he comes, he was a short, stocky guy, and he says, Rabbi Rovinsky, McGenzie. He was a legend. He says, now I can retire. And I said, no, Rabbi, because usually Mohelim generally don't get along. It's sad. In St. Louis, we're best of friends. But there's usually a little, competition and stuff.
Oh, because everyone wants to be a cut above the rest.
Exactly. That was actually one of my business cards in my earlier days. So when I was in Dallas, before I left, an old friend called me and said, my secretary just had a baby. She doesn't want to use a doctor for the circumcision. She wasn't Jewish. Would you do it? And
why doesn't she want to use a doctor?
Because it doesn't end up nice. It's painful.
And she was familiar with
familiar. Anyone who goes online and watches circumcision videos, they didn't have online back then. You do your research. It's barbaric. It's why it's usher to do it that way. It's so
interesting. The doctor is considered barbaric compared to the Mohel.
Right, but that's from our perspective. I mean, Lemaisa, it's MS, but if you it's sterile environment, and how can you go to
So now you're asked to do a bris for a shiksa.
For a shiksa.
For a goyish kid.
Right. And
what is the halachic implication?
So as long as they pay you. It sounds so
I'll do anything
so
for money.
Stereotype, right? But
I always said when they do my biography for art school, it's going to be called All for the Bucks.
But that is halacha. It's a befer shadin and shulchan aruch.
You're okay to do a milah.
Yeah. So right.
But why in halacha would they consider a guy wanting to have a bris milah?
What?
A circumcision. Why would a guy want to have a circumcision?
There are a lot of medical things that could be going on based on the orla, on the foreskin, and so on and so forth. So
there was such a concept of a guy wanting to have
absolutely.
a bris milah.
I mean, there are others who say one still shouldn't do it and so on. But I said no. I said, I don't want to get involved practicing medicine without a license. I mean, then I could really go to jail. So I spoke to a couple of attorneys who are in medical malpractice and so on and so forth. And they said, as long as they're coming to you because of a religious reason, they want a rabbi, they want the Jewish technique, they want it because it says so in the Bible, that Yashka was circumcised, so they want their kid circumcised like Yashka, whatever. So then you'd be protected under freedom of religion. Someone told me once
that was the concept of December 25th and January 1st.
Right.
It was 8
Even though he wasn't
apart.
really born on the 25th.
I know,
right.
but
that's why they did it. Well, one of the reasons.
That he had a bris.
So
it's kind of interesting because you think that if he was the son of God, he would have been born Mohel.
Right. Right, you would think so, like Adam was, and Adam, but
Anyway.
So he reminded me of a favor he had done for me a number of years earlier, and he said, "This is payback."
Wow.
Okay, it's called my Rebbe. You're allowed to do it, so I did it. What I didn't know is she was a client of a midwife, not the hospital, a midwife. So she told the midwife.
So anyone who's going to use a midwife doesn't want to go and use a doctor.
So this midwife then started telling her friends, and Chavra Islay. Today, I
became the Mohel for the Goyim,
and to the stars, right? But I don't know if that doesn't sound as chashuv as it was.
How many Goyim have you been mal?
Well over 20,000.
20,000? How do you fit in that many milas?
I make Dovid HaMelech look 20, like
20,000?
Yeah.
How's that possible?
I'll be in Dallas.
How many years?
I'll be in Dallas next week. For the Goyim part, since 1993. with the most coming. I mean, I do all the babies in one of the hospitals.
So it's about 20 years.
It's about 20 years, yeah.
And that's an average of how many a week?
It depends. Next week I'll be in Dallas with the help of Hashem, and I have 31 or 32 lined up so far.
You get any Muslims?
Tons. It's interesting.
But I thought they do it at 13.
No, not anymore. That's not a long time. Not in a long time. Yeah, they were all running away when they found out what the party was for. So today, with the help of Hashem, I work for close to 500-600 midwives and doctors around the country, and I have a route.
And are there any other Moalim who are servicing the Goyish community?
Not in that volume. So, but the Mila of this, or first of all, it allows me to stay in NCSY.
Has President Crow never done a Goyish?
He doesn't do Goyim, no. But he's flown down to Dallas to spend the day with me, and he sent his son and his son-in-law when they were
just to watch you do Goyim.
Yeah, and also some of the techniques, some of Yussel's technique.
Do you say Mazel Tov at the end?
They say Mazel Tov.
They say Mazel Tov.
But what's fascinating, they most of them ask me to bless the baby.
Do they have a Suda?
No. But they come to my office and
do they have a sandik? Do they bring?
No, usually the parents hold. The baby's on a pillow on a table. I don't do a whole. It's 15 seconds. Chick-chock. Now what happens is many times I'll find out that they're Jewish. I'm setting up and, the mother's holding the baby and she'll say, Rabbi, thank you so much for your willingness to do this. It's my pleasure. I said, but why? She said, this would have meant so much to my grandmother. I said, really? Why? Because my grandmother was Jewish. I said, your father's mother? No, my mother's mother. Kvater!
The shame be Yisrael.
It's no joke. And I write up a whole shtar and a tuda because no one would ever believe it. I mean, if people read Pesach's Kron books, and you should because they're phenomenal. Great chizuk. A few of my stories are in there. Winchester, Kentucky. These, stereo overalls and corn hats and coming out of the mouth. It turned out I went there to do a Goyish kid. The kid was a Yid. It's unbelievable. I mean, that's a story that'll break people's hearts. But so where were we? Now I feel like you went off on a side tangent. The Milo, that's what it was, is I'm the only one in America that can actually give real shimush to people who want to become Moalim. Now they have to either fly to England or come to Eretz Yisrael. Because I can have you meet me in one of my many cities in the country. We can do 30, 40, 50 babies in a day. And it would take you... Goyim. Right, so it's...
No one does 30, 40 Jewish babies.
No. And even then,
they all come to one place.
Right, they all come to one place. Yeah. Line them up, assembly line. But with personal touch. It's because that's... The truth is, I'm sorry, Moalim, but no one knows a good bris from a bad bris. They really, really don't. Especially in America, because at the hospitals, they leave so much extra skin that you could be a lousy moil and it looks normal. If you're a good moil, they want to know why it looks so nice. So it's the bedside manner and how you talk to them and make them feel and relieve their stress. So we all have all these...
You can't do 50 brisim in a day.
Sure you can.
And have a bedside manner.
Sure you can. Absolutely.
There's just not enough hours in the day.
Sure there are.
You could do it at night, though, for a Goy.
Right. So I'll fly in the night before. I'll start at 8:30 in the morning. I'll go all the way till 6, 7 o'clock at night, and then I'll fly home.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, it's
how
really...
do you physically just...
It's
got to take a toll.
It does.
50 babies.
It does. I mean, I finally raised the table so I don't have to bend over so much. Oy, my back. I feel like those old European men,
right.
But I don't have the accent. So I end up training Talmidim, and they can come to me 4 or 5ve times.
And also they can practice on a guy. So
it's hands on.
They mess it up. When you're because compared to the hospital.
Remember, you have not yet. Right. That's true. So you have not just listening to your podcast.
They set the bar so low,
Yeah, there are good doctors. I don't want to diss the doctors. They're really good people, but that's the way they were trained. So the technique, the instruments don't allow for a good bris because the instruments come in sizes. And they pick the closest size. No, it's called a gamko or a plastabel, and they come in sizes. So it's the closest size to the baby is what they use, which usually means it's not a custom circumcision. With the way we do it as Yidden, we can take off as much skin as necessary and angle the cut to match what the baby needs. So the mushal I give is suits come 38, 40, 42, 44. What happens if you're a 41? So you can either walk
on a few pounds.
You put on a few pounds, lose some weight, or so we can give a size 41 bris. Now they make suits size 41, but you get the point.
Right.
So anyway, and if you're learning by I'll say a regular mohel with Yidden, they don't let you touch the baby. It's very hard. You get 30 seconds, 2 seconds maybe to do a hafrada or different parts, and then they'll shove you out of the way because it's their reputation. And the families are hiring Moishela or, the other mohelim.
And they don't want
some new kid doing it. So here, most of these families are midwife families anyway, or, they've heard about me. So they're more relaxed. And so you can be a mohel, fly down with me to Kansas City.
Are there churches that give you a haskama?
Yeah. Yeah, and especially the Amish. You know what Amish are?
The Amish.
Right, Hasidim without mustaches.
Yeah.
Right. So the Amish, the Mennonites, I do for all of them around the country.
Are there a lot of them in Missouri? I thought they were all in Pennsylvania.
No, Pennsylvania, they're Missouri, Arkansas. You fly down. You don't have to be away from your family. You meet me in the morning, wherever I am, Wichita, Kansas, or whatever the cities are, Dallas, whatever, and you fly home at night. And in between, you've done 30, 40 babies. So you can become a good mohel with a few hundred brisim under your belt by the time in 4 or 5 visits.
So then by the time you come around to a Jewish kid,
you're better than half the mohelim out there.
Wow.
And you save a vel to gelt, and you don't have to leave your family for 4, 6, 10 weeks.
So how is it that nobody else thought of this?
I didn't think of this.
Yeah, but now that you've got this is a market. There's got to be a market out there.
If it wasn't for this, I couldn't.
There's no way
I couldn't continue kiruv.
There's no way you can do as many goyim as one bris.
So my talmidim, I help set up the same mahalach in their various cities. I have talmidim in New Jersey. I have Atlanta, Chicago.
I know a fellow who sells daled minim to goyim.
Okay.
They were like evangelicals.
Right,
They want to do like biblical stuff,
I've had people bring bikurim to shul.
They're not as makbid.
So I know which ones he sells them.
Yeah, you never find these.
But they're willing to pay more because they have more Mesiras Nefesh.
But you don't see these Christians going like this, Is this Kotum over here? What is this over here? It's a bleto on the yesterday.
So my Talmidim have all set up practices, and then I have Chaverim also that I've met either fellow
you get a
Talmidim.
cut like Amway,
in some of them, yes.
That's the way
if I refer out.
Because you get enough people.
Right.
So then you can bring in new people, and you can go to one of those airport hotels and bring in a bunch of people. And
my wife wants me to train doctors and set up clinics literally around the country. But I can't do that. I don't want to give over what we do for Yidden. I don't want to give that over to God. I won't even use the same kalim. I have separate kalim. I have no reason you can't use regular kalim.
Right.
But it's just, it's a mishigas. It's a mishigas that I have.
Do a gola,
So anyway, that's how I end up getting the goyim. That's how I'm able to stay in kiruv.
Okay, so now what are you doing in St. Louis?
In St. Louis,
Mila.
Right. I left the day school in 2001, started a software company with a Talmud of mine, and we had raised the venture capital that we needed, and we were working on the software. And you know how when you call for help to India, it's hard to understand.
Yes.
Difficulty. So we were having difficulty with the development of the software. I don't know if it was for the accent or just maybe we didn't understand. So the Balabatim said, Rovinsky, kids, you were an NCSY. We need someone for 3 months. Just get us to the end of the year.
So what happens to the software company?
My Talmud still has it. He runs it. He's Baruch Hashem very successful. I have no shaykhs. No. My options ran out.
What is with you?
I'm a lot smarter now, so don't worry. And for 3 months, I said, okay, I'll do it. That way I could make a salary from them, and I didn't have to bleed the company from the VC geld. And I never went back to the software company. I was doing what I loved, and I had my parnasa, part of it from NCSY, and the rest of it from my Mila practice. And then about 10 years ago, when midwifery really took off. I mean, it wasn't pashut here because there are the lawsuits and fighting with the states. And I remember I helped fight in Kansas, the state of Kansas, testifying. But
it's hard there because they all have guns.
Right. Well,
you have to fight with them.
I also have.
Oh, a shootout at the old
Yehuda Halevi said, "Libi b'mizrach," right?
Yeah.
All right. So a guy. I think I just killed myself in the public opinion. The gun I carry, is Israeli. It's a Masada Slim, right?
Well, you always have that knife.
Neshek shali b'mizrach.
You can always pull out the knife. So
right, yeah. That's what I say on the terrorists because I don't check my bags.
How do you bring it? I was about to say, how do you bring it onto the plane?
Who sees this?
That's where you say you have a connection with the. So they know you're bringing a big bag of knives.
No, they don't know the knives because I hide them. I know how to pack my bag. So I can't believe I just said this online. Oh my gosh, huh?
It doesn't show up in the X-ray.
Not the way I pack it. No.
Wow.
It's please, anyone from TSA that may be watching or listening, please don't say anything.
So now you have you could also morph this into terrorism.
Right.
Should you decide.
If there's a terrorist on the plane, I can maul him. I guarantee you he won't be doing nothing after that. But I checked my bag twice in my life. I had a bris on 9/11 in Dallas and 9/11 happened. And so I was the first.
You couldn't even get home.
I couldn't get to Dallas. I usually fly in, do the bris, and fly back. So they stopped all the flights. So I was on the first flight out of St. Louis to Dallas, and they made me check the bag because there was no carry-ons back then. And I checked it. They lost it. Baruch Hashem, my parents lived in Dallas. So I always had extra stuff there, so I was able to do it. And then they came up with this new mishigas about liquids, 3 ounces. So anyway, long story short there, I show up at the airport, you got to check your bag. I said, why? And they told me, and I said, when did that happen? Midnight last night. So I checked it, they lost it. Baruch Hashem, I was going to Dallas anyway. So again, I had backup equipment. So ever since then, I don't check. Even
and they let you bring on the liquids and the knives and
everything.
The gun.
The gun I haven't done. I keep one in Dallas.
The bazooka, the explosives.
I keep my father's Zechrona Levrachas. His gun is in Dallas, so if I need one, if I'm there for more than a few hours, I'll pick it up.
So you're doing the Mila, you're doing NCSY,
right?
And where do you see yourself going from here? Just this project. You're building a center.
Yeah, so we have a job to do. It's Yemos HaMashiach. The thirst for Torah is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's so easy. You just dress like a mensch, you talk like a mensch, and you put yourself in environments with non-frum people. And you don't have to work. You don't have to be a Talmud Chacham. Just be normal.
I'll forget about it.
And they don't.
It's easy to be a Talmud Chacham.
But it's they're drawn to it. I learn with many different groups of people that are not from, and the classes are supposed to be an hour. It's like I bring up a topic and wherever they want to take it, and the last 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and it's like. I'm thinking, all right, Rebbeinu Shalom wants me to stay. My wife wants me to come home. But if they're wanting to learn, and it's also the big question, for example, in NCSY, we have this program called JSU where we go into the public schools with free pizza. And so we're back up to over 400 kids. We see almost 5,000 times last year. Before COVID, it was 800. The kids are totally different today, by the way, after COVID. It's a different world. But there's a debate. One school of thought is how many kids became Shomer Shabbos, how many kids went to yeshiva, and if it's not, a certain amount, then it was a waste of time and money.
That to me is the definition of a cult.
Okay,
that's a definition of a cult. And was where you have to become from according to my standard and the way that I say it.
And then there's another school of thought that says the mere fact that a non-frum kid comes once to a club,
it's unbelievable.
And
you don't know where that goes.
And learns a Ramchal, I mean, I
The
think
difference between him deciding to send his kid to a day school or not years later.
Right, or giving to a Jewish organ, or marrying Jewish. I have a Talmud today. If anyone wants, from Eretz Yisrael, that wants a great guy for a Shabbos meal, he's learning in Or Sameach. You can reach out to me. He's learning in Or Sameach. This is a kid that came to one or two clubs, not in his school because he was the only Jew in his high school. We didn't have a club there. And I taught a course on Eretz Yisrael, on Zionism. You know, I'm the greatest Zionist, all of a sudden the expert. But it was a way to reach kids. We gave college credits, so the kids came. We had 40 kids some semesters. It was insane. So this guy shows up, and we developed a kasher.
One second, where'd you get pizza in St. Louis?
Oh, so the Fleshik Butcher Shop made the pizza. Now we have a real pizza guy out of his basement. Rabbi Elephant, if you're listening, awesome pizzas. I don't know if he ships, but Rabbi Dovid, Elephant's Pizza.
They raised money
to open a pizza shop.
Because they said you can't be a Jewish community without a pizza shop.
So this campus we're building, this house and stuff. Yeah. So there was a different piece of property that I really wanted, because on one side of the building we were going to open up like a burger, hot dog, spaghetti place, and the other side was going to be a pizza shop that was going to be owned by NCSY, and it was going to generate revenue, and it was going to service the community because there wasn't anything, and I was going to bring Elephant's Pizza into. Anyway, so he came to this class, and I did everything I could to get him to go to Eretz Yisrael. Everything. It wasn't matzliach. He graduates college, calls me up, and says, I'm ready. And he's sitting and learning in Or Sameach. Wow. There was another boy who came to this Israel course, never came to, beforehand, he didn't come to JSU. Afterwards, he did. And I always do an icebreaker. And he says, my great-grandfather, it was a great, however many greats, was the Kotzker rabbi. And I said, the Kotzker? He said, yeah, the Kotzker. And I just like, oh my gosh. And I went over to him and I said, don't freak out, but can I kiss you? To Einikel from the Kotzker. Today he's married, yeshiva shagai.
It's amazing thing. When I was in NCSY, which only works in high school, you think that the story is an O. Henry short story. And then you realize it's a Dickens novel. And it goes on for a whole lifetime. You
never, ever know. And this goes, you don't have to be in Chinuch, in Kiruv, to make an impact. If you're a businessman or woman, or you're shopping in the grocery store, the Kiddush Hashem, a chaver of mine, Shabsi Gartner, started an organization called Living Kiddush Hashem, and that's all he's promoting. Just be a mensch. We don't even have to work hard. It used to be people had manners in derech eretz. Yeah. So you had to push the.
A lot of years ago.
Yeah, push the Torah. Today, just be a mensch. Show good midos. That's enough to win them over. I walked in the other day. I went to Tzfas. I always try and go to Tzfas anytime I'm here, and I was in Dallas for a bris many, many years ago, and I walk in. And the guy it was this mansion. And the guy says to me, he says, Rabbi, you ever hear of the Alshik? I said, Alshik? Yeah, Rabbi, that rabbi who wrote on the Bible? I said, you mean the Alshik HaKadosh? Yeah, that's him. That's my great-great-great-great-grandpappy. So whenever in life, when I have stuff, and that's why I go to his kever whenever I can in Tzfas, I said, Al Shech HaKadosh?
Yeah, you got
I took care of yours. You need to take care of mine.
That's beautiful.
Rab Dishon said that. Rab Dishon said that if you're involved in Chinuch and Kiruv, you have the right. And I double-checked this with him. He was very involved in Camp Nagila, which we didn't even discuss that, a Kiruv camp I started together, NCSY and the Aguda. That's Yemos HaMashiach.
Yes.
All right, now it's its own organization. But he said you have the right to stand in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom Yamim Nairaim or anytime and demand, not ask, demand whatever you need for your children, what they need, that you're taking care of his children. He has Christ to take care of your children.
Wow. Rabbi Rovinsky, a privilege. And what can I tell you? I'm glad we were able to get you here. I don't know if you did any Arabs while you were here.
No.
Walking around with your knife.
I tried. I did bring my bag. I did bring my bag.
When Jews and Arabs walk around with knives, it almost never ends in a bris milah. But anyway, it has been a pleasure and a privilege. And we can't wait to have you back.
Before you sign out.
Yes.
All right. I got to do two things, if that's okay.
Sure.
Friends of Marty Levine WhatsApp group. This is a shout out to all of you. I'm not going to mention names because I'm going to forget somebody, but they're avid fans of yours. They were all your former NCSYers.
Almost 45
We go back
years
home.
to
Yeah.
NCSY.
So I didn't know we were going to be doing this.
I was young and a legend.
You don't realize the impact you've had on me.
Now I'm almost 65 and I'm supposed to retire, but I don't have a job, so I don't know what to do. I have to get a job so I can retire.
I know this is a funny. Can I be serious for a second?
Sure, you can.
Right. And I'm going to turn to the audience. You listen to Rabbi Orlofsky every week when he's not on hiatus.
It wasn't me.
I know it wasn't you, but
I was still sitting here every week talking. It's just nobody was filming
and
it.
I'm going to say this, and Yisrael, you're not allowed to edit this out. Those who don't know Rabbi Orlofsky don't know who he really is. I mean, you hear his Torah; he's amazing.
Really,
but
Sam Goldenfeld.
The impact he has had on thousands of kids in NCSY. I remember he introduced me to the first Hasidic Rebbe I ever met, the Fulabula Rebbe. But no, for real, he made Yiddishkeit fun. I mean, he had us mesmerized, and he did it through simcha, through ava, because that's the key to influencing and teaching and inspiring anybody. You have to have the ava. People know, little kids know, adults know, and Rabbi Orlofsky is really the whole package. He didn't know I was going to say this, but it's my way of saying thank you for the impact you've had on my life and my chevra, and you really don't know. And is there time for a quick story or no?
Do whatever you want.
No, you can always edit
That's
it
right.
out.
He's going to edit this down to 15 minutes. So
okay. No, and because you said it's a long game.
That's right.
So one of the first crazy bris stories I was in Dallas, and the Jewish Community Center had this amazing program. Some people probably wouldn't approve of it, but every rabbi, rav, teacher taught a class on Thursday nights. It was called The Joys of Jewish Learning. And I was asked to teach. We don't really have Haredim, but we have Yeshivish and all the way to the far left. And so I was teaching a course on the joys of the Jewish life cycle. And the first week was bris milah and baby namings. So there was a knock at the door. This woman says, my Reform rabbi didn't show up. Can I sit in on your class? Sure. So I had about like 60 people there. And I'm teaching about milah and namings. So after the class, people ask their questions, they leave, and I see her sitting in the back, and she's just like crying. She comes up to me and says, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure. She says, why is God punishing me? I said, punishing you? She says, yeah, I've been married for 5 years. I can't have a child. I keep having miscarriages. What did I do that God is punishing me? So I said, first of all, how do you know God is punishing you? I was much more soft than that, but like you're a prophet. So we started talking.
It's better than saying because you're evil.
Right. That has never worked. That has never worked.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious.
So anyway, so we started talking. They threw us out of the building. It's midnight. We're on the parking lot. And we're just talking about life and so on and so forth. And she says, is there anything the Torah says about being able to have children? So I said, yeah. I said a few things. Do you light Shabbos candles? No. I said, so maybe start lighting Shabbos candles. You find out when sunset is. I'll send you a calendar, and 18 minutes before you light Shabbos candles, I'll send you the blessing. Okay, what about mikvah? I already knew that was it. Yeah. She says, what's a mikvah?
That's right.
So I explained it to her, and I said, you may want to consider looking into it. I can hook you up with a woman that can go into more details. And then I said, but the real question is, why should Hashem give you a child? What are you going to do with that child to make the Jewish people stronger, to deepen the connection with Hashem? And we spoke a little longer, and that was the end. She didn't come back to my class. Fast forward to the summer. I was running NCSY. I was the assistant director of NCSY Goes to Yeshiva, which is now Camp Sport. Plug for NCSY summer programs. Unbelievable. They have just guys and just girls also. So I get a call, and she says, and I can use her name because she's given me permission. She says, Rabbi Rovinsky. Yes, this is before cell phones. She said, this is Mrs. Greenfield. I don't know if you remember me. I said, sure I do. My wife wanted to know where I was at 1 o'clock in the morning that night of class. I said, how are you? She says, I'm in the hospital. I said, what's wrong? She said, I'm holding my son. This is 10 months later.
Wow.
And I want you to do the breast.
Wow.
So I said, Jeff, I got to fly back to Dallas for the day. So he says, go. I guess I wasn't very effective at camp if he let me go. But at the bris, I always give the parents a chance to speak. And again, they're not from. So I give the parents a chance to speak. And she begins by saying, I want to thank Rabbi Rovinsky, who's responsible for this baby. So I said, whoa. So when her husband and I...
Now your wife knows where you were in the middle of it. Anyway.
So when her husband and I and her went into the back room to show how to take care of the baby, I said, listen, you embarrassed me out there, but that's all right. But now can I ask you a question? I said, did you do any of the things we spoke about? And she said, I did them all. And I started attending an Orthodox synagogue. We're not observant, but we started going and started learning and attending classes. Fast forward another 20 years. I'm at an NCSY Shabbaton in Memphis, Tennessee. And they're dedicating Havdalah. Usually, for those who don't know, it's a kid who's grown or accomplished despite adversity in their learning or Kiyum HaMitzvos. And they're dedicating and they're talking about this story. And I said, oh, that sounds like a family I know from Dallas. And they announced that it's, I forget her first name, Greenfield, who's not from our region, but from Southern. And it's like, it can't be. So I went up to her and I said, all right, don't get creeped out, because it's easy to an old guy. Says, you from Dallas? Yeah. You have a brother? Yeah. Older brother? Yeah. Did your mother have difficulty having children before he was born? She looks at me and says, how do you know that? I said, get her on the phone now. And now this girl's totally creeped out. and all the advisors are standing around this is like a real Pesach Krohn story in the developing. Anyway, so the whole family became from. And this girl, she was graduating. She was an artist. She was on her way to Eretz Yisrael to go to seminary.
Wow.
And you just, and that's the ultimate message. We plant seeds. We don't do kiruv. Anyone who thinks they make someone from is a nar. It's ego, it's stupidity. It's not true. We're shlichim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we plant seeds. We live our lives. We try and do it with integrity, with warmth. And you don't know what the seeds are. There's a guy on my block in St. Louis. And there may be poskim listening to this who told me I did the wrong thing, and maybe I did. He hated Orthodox Jews. And he pulls up alongside me one Shabbos, and he says, are you a rabbi? I said, yeah. He says, why do all you people walk in the middle of the street? Don't you know someone can get hurt, hit by a car? And I said, sir, you're 100% right. I'm sorry. And he says, oh, that wasn't the reaction I was expecting. I said, what's your name? And he's sitting in the car, smoking a cigarette, the windows rolled down, and I'm talking to him through the window. And it must have been B'li Guzma, 40 minutes conversation. Today, we're best of friends. One of his kids is a Reform rabbi, married to a Reform rabbi, but he has respect. He doesn't agree, but he has respect for our style. He says, you should have been a conservative rabbi. That's a common thing also at Brisim.
Yeah.
This rabbi, are you Orthodox? I said, I'm Jewish. Yeah, but what are you? Reform, conservative, Orthodox? If they can't figure out from the yarmulke that I'm, I said, you know what? Let me finish the ceremony, and then you'll tell me what you think I am. And so afterwards, I'll go up to them. Usually it's the grandparents or something. Okay, what am I? Reform, conservative, Orthodox? you're definitely either conservative or reform. I said, why do you say that? Because you're funny, you're warm, you're engaging. And I said, I happen to be a right-wing, ultra-Orthodox Jew of Hasidic descent. Now in Eretz Yisrael, I may be called a guy, I don't know. But in America, and they say, it's not possible. I says, yes, it is. And I happen to be like most of the Orthodox Jews. You just unfortunately haven't met the right ones.
Right.
So that's the bottom line. Be a mensch in whatever you do. And you don't have to, you have to be a professional person involved in kiruv.
Gewaldig. Okay, Rabbi
Thank you for the
Rovinsky,
opportunity. I can retire now because if I've been on the Rabbi Orlofsky podcast, I've accomplished everything in life that I need to accomplish.
As I was talking to Mordechai Shapiro, and I was asking if he wanted to be on the podcast, and I was like, I never heard of this. I said, Mordechai, this is your big chance. You might finally get out there and people might hear about you. Once you've been on this, that's it. Then you've moved to a whole nother level. This is not one of those small things.
And people can, if people want ideas, let them reach out. It's
Gewaldig. All right, so we'll have to put your contact information.
I'll be happy to give
for
that.
people. And that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can send an email. You can make a comment. You can download
Sponsor
the theme
a podcast.
song. You can sponsor a podcast. There's going to be, it's not up yet, but there's going to be an opportunity to sponsor.
Can I sponsor a podcast?
Sure.
I'm going to sponsor one in your honor for all you've done for Klal Yisrael.
Oh my gosh. Well,
just not this one, because then that would look really self-serving, like he paid to be on the podcast.
That's right. No, people have done that too. That's all right.
Really?
Yeah.
I should have done this years ago.
Works for me. Anyway. So you can download the theme song. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim, Mesil Shisharim, or Daf Yomi, or Tefillah. And we're going to have soon an opportunity to sponsor for the 5-minute Parsha message, which we're going to be starting with Parshas Bereshis. So a few people have already reached out to me because they said, I wanted to sponsor it and I didn't see the button yet on the website. So we're installing the button now. We're wiring it on. And I don't know if it goes on my computer. I don't know if it works on everybody's, but we're going to try. Anyway, just push the button. Call me and I'll push the button. And that's it for this episode. I am Dovid Orlofsky.
Mike Rovinsky.
And this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.